Okay, good evening. The board has been in closed session since 6 p.m. for 2 items: collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for 1 or more classes of employees, and 2, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. We have 6 board members present and 1 absent. Could we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have 2 recognitions tonight. The first is Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival selectees. Thank you. Come on.
All right, good evening. If the students want to come up that are being recognized. You guys can just stand across the middle. Are you each here? Go ahead.
Good evening, members of the board, administrators, and faithful Elmhurst families. On behalf of the Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 Middle School Music Department, it is my honor and privilege to announce the middle school students accepted to the Illinois Music Educators Association Junior Festival for this year. On Saturday, November 4th, 2017, the Illinois Music Educators Association Elementary and Junior High Division held its annual District 1 Music Festival at Lincoln Way Central High School in New Lenox, Illinois. The ILMA Junior and Senior Jazz Band Festival took place on November 11th, 2017 at Thornton Fractional South Hill High School in Lansing, Illinois. These festivals involve students selected from more than 60 schools throughout the southwestern metropolitan Chicago area. Our students prepared for and successfully completed a rigorous audition in order to be accepted into the prestigious junior festival ensembles. Their tenacious work ethic and commitment to their artistry is commendable. They have each done an excellent job representing their ensemble, their middle school, and also the entire Elmhurst District 205 community. On behalf of myself and the rest of the middle school music department of Brian Berg, Ellen Gary, John Gaunt, Heather Knight, Cindy Cross, Kim Lambert-Hack, TJ Mitchell, Evangelia Pagonis, Stacy Savateri, Lindsay Sickinger, Jessica Tadavosian, and Ricardo Vasquez, as well as the elementary school general music department of Carrie Alfano, Peter Baez, Jessica Cowger, Samantha Kunanen, Tracy Lukertz, Joel Miller, TJ Mitchell, and myself, Jeremy Nemick, extend our proudest congratulations to each and every one of these following students: Peyton Burke, Ann Griffin, Samantha Hess, Nathan Lee, Michael Spur, Owen Espinoza, Rose Kungle, Maya Valdez, Casey Cortez, Madeline Fine, Sitlali Hercalano, Sydney Lee, Erica Lenhart, Quinn Olson, Daniel Sanders, Andrew Kozur, Christina Vesmar, Taylor Headley, Ariella Eslani, Lauren Capuno, Tegan Cullen, Henry Deverman, Reese Pavlik, Grace Stumpf, Michael Reams, Joanna Johnson, Charlotte Reedy, and Amaran Sharma. Would you please congratulate these students for their accomplishments?
Are any of you saying anything? So congratulations to all of you. It is my privilege to honor all of you for your exceptional music accomplishments. I know that you've practiced hard and gotten up early and obviously love music. So thank you for making us proud and all the people around the table proud, and all those people out there proud for your musical abilities and receiving this honor of excellence that you earned. Tonight, I won't repeat what he said. You'll get a proclamation. The board is very proud because these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to Bryan, Churchville, and Sandburg Middle Schools, and to District 205, and to the community. So thank you so much for working so hard and making us proud, and keep making music. Okay? So let's give them a round of applause. And then I'm gonna give you an award and shake your hand, and then you can go shake all of these people's hands, okay? Thank you to all the parents and to all the teachers who help make these kids make music. So thank you.
Thank you. The next recognition is Illinois Principals Association DuPage Region Middle School Principal of the Year. Jackie? Thanks, Karen.
Sure, that'd be great.
You have to stand up in front just like your students.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Dement, and I am the Region Director. There you go. Perfect. I am the Region Director for the DuPage region of the Illinois Principals Association, and I'm here this evening to present Miss Jacqueline DeCipio with the award. She was chosen this year as the Middle School Principal of the Year for our DuPage region. So congratulations, Jackie. There you go. You're welcome. Jackie was nominated by her superintendent and had some wonderful things to say about her and her leadership in her building, which was why she was chosen as the Middle School Principal of the Year. We also have a nice bag of goodies for you from the IPA, including things that are really helpful as a principal, like an ice scraper and a pizza cutter. So, so congratulations, and we're really proud for you to be representing our region and to be a part of our region as a principal of such outstanding stature. So thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
All right, so I have a few words though. We are doing a lot of things in the middle schools this year, and the three principals in the middle school invited the board to go to the schools and see the great things that are happening, and get a sense as we make decisions that are coming to us to see it firsthand. And with that, there's just fabulous things going on at our middle schools. So it was a pleasure actually to open up board docs for this meeting and see this recognition. So just a few things that were going on at the school and that we talked about and that are seen. So with that in mind, you know, we as a community and a staff, you know, we as the board had heard when 6 years ago that we wanted to be the best practices district, and we wanted to get back to the district that other districts come to, you know, looking at best practices. And with that, I have been in this district, or in Elmhurst, for almost 30 years. My kids have been out of the system, 25 and 20, now 24 years old. And when they were in elementary school, we as a community and school were talking about upgrading our middle schools. We have wonderful things at York. We have a lot of opportunities, and we need to prepare our students, even at middle school, to have those same sorts of opportunities at their levels. And so with that, we have embarked upon this effort. And it has taken everyone to commit to. And so it really was a great thing to hear that we were recognizing, or that you all were recognizing, our middle schools. Jackie, and you in particular, the piece that really was highlighted for me as I went to your school was that it really takes unique leadership to have everyone buying into what we're trying to do, and not just buying in, but believing in what we have to do. And with that, being able to provide feedback and having those conversations that people can share whatever they want to share. And believe me, they did at your school. And for you to be able to take that in and have them be listened to and really kind of shift the culture to be constructive, to value everyone's position. There's value, and it came out clear in speaking with you and seeing what was going on, is that there is respect, and that's what needs to be, for everyone's position. This organization is a $110 million organization, and there are many different positions that do very different things, and we would be lost without any of them. And so the real key for us in moving us forward and continuing, you know, to be that great and excellent, good to great, you know, education system that really is continuing to do the best for our students and our community, is to be able to have people that buy into. Everyone has different positions, and they have different roles, and they all are valuable. So I had to highlight that. All right, so with that, the proclamation. Whereas the mission of the Illinois Principals Association is to develop, support, and advocate for innovative educational leaders, and in keeping with Illinois standards for principals, which state a competent administrator is an educational leader who promotes the success of all students by acting with integrity, fairness, and in an ethical manner. And whereas the Illinois Principals Association DuPage region has announced that Jacqueline DeCipio, principal at Bryan Middle School, has been selected by the Illinois Principals Association DuPage region as the 2017-2018 Middle School Principal of the Year. And whereas this award recognizes middle school principals who have demonstrated a positive impact on their students and learning community by ensuring the school climate is positive and reflects high staff and student morale, demonstrating creativity and imagination in bringing about positive change, being willing to take risks to improve student learning, moving actively to implement the goals and objectives of the school, working collaboratively with teachers and other staff to improve educational programs and student achievement, anticipating emerging problems and acting effectively to resolve them, and involving the community in the life of the school and using community resources for students. And whereas, as Elmhurst District 205 Superintendent Dr. David Moyer stated in his nomination, Ms. DeCipio has been asked to lead monumental and transformative change in a short period of time. Examples of which include a successful one-to-one personalized learning implementation utilizing Chromebooks in 1 year, implementation of a new English language arts curriculum, and the addition of instructional coaches in year 2, ongoing development of common assessment in all grade levels and content areas, and a major overhaul of the schedule to include dedicated time for interventions and enrichment and increased co-teaching for the 2017-18 school year. And whereas this accomplishment brings pride and prestige to Bryan Middle School, District 205, and the community at large, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to the 2017-2018 DuPage Region Middle School Principal of the Year, Jacqueline DeCipio, for this outstanding achievement. Congratulations, Jackie, and thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is public comments. And the board will receive public comments for up to 3 minutes. And we have 4 people signed up for public comments tonight. The first is Robin Petchel.
Hello again. My name is Robin Petchel, and I'm here again to talk about Conrad Fisher and dual language. Tonight, you, the board, are going to be voting on dual language, and I'm almost certain that you will be voting to approve this program to start next year at Fisher. You are going to vote yes despite community concerns, basic questions being answered, and despite several parents stating they will be looking elsewhere for their students next year if this is approved. You are going to vote yes despite being shown only 1 year of the program and not being presented the fully implemented program. A fact that I truly can't wrap my mind around. How at the last meeting did no one ask, where's the full program? No one. Seriously, how could you not call into question the fact that you are being asked to vote on a program that will span multiple grade levels, possibly into high school, and you're not shown anything but the first year? The full implementation being missing from the presentation leaves only 2 options. 1, there is no plan ready for beyond next year. 2, there is a plan, and it's not being shared until after voting because the community may not like it. Both options are frightening. Next, as far as I'm concerned, bringing in parents, as you guys are planning to do from Naperville, to talk about dual language is unnecessary. We are not planning on doing what Naperville is doing. They have their program split among 5 grade schools, not crammed into 1. Not one of those schools is a full Title I school, either like Fisher. At these Naperville schools, the low income percentage ranges from 12% to 31.7%. Conrad Fisher is 63.3%. I want to speak to people at another full Title I school that is doing similar to what's being proposed. You know who should come talk to us? The administration in Barrington about their program. As was stated last meeting, it is a desirable waitlisted program. Like Naperville, it too is split up among several grade schools in the district. The highest low-income percentage at these schools is 17.7%. Let's hear about why they did that. Because they have a full Title I elementary school with a high low-income percentage, higher than even Fisher's. At Sunny Hill, this Barrington school, it is 43.9% limited English proficient. Fisher is close to that with 40.3%. Yet, they didn't place a program there. Why? It was stated in the last meeting, the reason Fisher is getting the program is because it already has a second language speakers at our school, but so did Barrington. Yet they chose against it. Why? I talked to their dual language coordinator, and one of the reasons it's not held at Sunny Hill is there's no room there unless they want to start moving students out of their home school.
Robin, could you finish your comments, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Which is something that was rumored to be happening in the future here. We want a successful program like the other districts do, not one that has quickly been put together. We deserve better than this. We deserve a program that is completely planned, presented, and had concerns addressed before voting. We deserve Naperville and Barrington's programs, but that's not what we're getting. I just hope that that you guys know what you're doing, because these are real children, not experiments. And even though they may not be your kids, I wish you would think, vote, and ask questions like they were.
Next is Tanya Cummins. Thank you.
I'll keep this short, unlike other meetings. I've attended and spoken at multiple school board meetings recently, and at the beginning of public comments, speakers were often admonished to be respectful. The hypocrisy of that is immeasurable. My fellow Conrad Fisher parents and I have raised concerns on several topics and have been unilaterally dismissed. Our concerns regarding a lack of a crossing guard were ignored. Our playground only received mulch after asking for 6 months and addressing the board twice. And our concerns about the inequity being created by the unchecked donations that the board happily accepts were ignored. And now we have dual language being voted on, despite not a single one of our questions answered or our concerns addressed. So please spare us all the commentary and respect. If any one of you from the board or the administration are feeling less than respected, I'd like to share a line from one of my favorite songs that I recently shared elsewhere, but is applicable here as well. You get what you put in, and people get what they deserve.
Okay, thank you. Tamika?
I was not going to come today, let alone speak. I figured there was nothing more that could be said or done regarding the lack of communication with our community, regarding this dual language issue before it was passed. But then I went to lunch with a friend, and someone else at a neighboring table overheard my passion and excused herself before butting into our conversation. And she said to me, "Please continue to ask questions. How they're going about this is wrong." And I realized I had to come back to tell you this. First, a dual language committee formed with input from one parent out of the parents of 440 students at my school is not representative of our voice. That is all I will say about that. Second, I have yet to see any long-term studies proving that the dual language model you propose is successful. In fact, I would have loved to have known if there was a study out there which breaks down the success rates amongst only native Spanish speakers that have completed the program, so that they could be compared to the success rates of native English speakers that have completed the program. And third, all that we wanted to have made clear to us was to make sure that the program was a benefit to all students and not just those who are native Spanish speakers. That's all. And from the full day, half day disparity, it already seems that the non-dual language students are already being pushed aside. And also, every attempt at getting anyone to speak to me or my friends who are not a part of this mystery committee was shut down. Well, good luck coming to Fisher after you've already voted to come and have talks or discussions or parent meetings or whatever with parents who are already frustrated, angry, and frankly insulted by the way you handled this. Think about it. Is this the way you would want a program rolled out at your kid's school? Would you be okay with someone making all the decisions for you and telling you it's for the best, just wait and see? No. And I can bet this type of strategy wouldn't work at too many other schools in town. No, you'd have a full house here tonight in protest. But you can bulldoze a program like this over a school where almost over 60% are poor, hardworking, non-English speaking families. Because, well, they're probably too busy tonight with life concerns rather than attending a meeting like this tonight. But I'll be here. We'll continue to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Marchese.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael, and I'm just here to offer a potential cost-saving solutions for the District 205. I know there's a lot of expenses coming up, especially with the summer, with a lot of the renovations and maintenance to a lot of the facilities. I work for a local garbage company, and I requested some information from the district office. I noticed that my company can do the same work that your current vendors are doing. We can cut actually your expenses by over 50%. And with the expenses that are planned for this summer, I was looking to see if I can maybe alleviate some of that stress. I know I only have a couple minutes tonight, but if you guys are interested in learning more, I'd be happy to meet with someone and talk to you guys further about how I can free up some of your internal expenses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kara. Okay, we're moving on to reports and presentations. The first report is our annual audit review. Chris Welton.
We have Andy Mays here from Klein Hall CPAs representing, they performed our audit for this year. So with that, Andy Mays.
Thank you. No, you have a full agenda, so I'll be brief. We have completed the annual audit of the school district, and as auditors, it's our job to provide an opinion as to whether your financial statements are presented fairly in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. And of course, it is our opinion. Now, not all school districts in Illinois get a clean audit opinion. Most actually are qualified for cash basis reporting or lack of historical cost fixed asset records or something like that. But District 205 has no such qualifications. In fact, 205 goes to the extra effort of preparing a comprehensive annual financial report. And that includes an introductory section which discusses what's going on in the districts, initiatives, local economy, that sort of thing. And the statistical section, which includes a whole slew of mostly 10-year historical data, so you can see some trends and gather some good information there. Our emphasis is on the middle section, the financial section, and that's what we give our opinion on. Just a couple of quick observations. If you read no further than page 3 of your report, and the report is 113 pages long, you would have a very good idea of what happened financially within the district for the year. But I want to concentrate on one page here primarily, and that is page 18. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but that's the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances for the year. And this is a consolidated presentation of your revenues and expenses by major fund type. Districts are always interested in where their fund balances stand, and one measure of that is to compare it to annual expenditures. Your fund balances are around that 40% range at year end. Now, you're typically flush with fund balance at year end because you're right on the heels of your June tax collections. But 40% may seem like a lot, but really you need fund balance. You know, there's several reasons why you need ample fund balance. One is just simply for cash flow purposes. After the September collections, you have to go all the way to next June until you have significant revenues. If there are any significant capital items that you might be faced with that you don't have the ability to issue bonds or otherwise borrow for. And the biggest factor there is any potential curveballs that the state might throw your way. This could include reduced or delayed grant revenues. You know, there's talks out there now of potential property tax freezes that could erode your fund balance rather quickly. And then the biggest one that scares me, and if you look at page 39 of your report, you'll see the net pension liability related to TRS. And the liability related or associated just with District 205 is $465 million. Net. That's after assets. Yes. Yeah. Now, the district's share of that is $9 million. The state's on the hook for the other $457 million. It's a lot of money. You know, or statewide, that number is $165 billion. These are huge numbers, and if they ever push those liabilities back to the districts, that's going to hurt. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. It's just been a few years that our audit reports have been required to address that number. A couple other observations. You refinanced some bonds this year. You had a net savings there to the district of economically $2.4 million, and also a savings in cash flows, cash outlays over the years of about the same number. So that was an excellent move. And that was really about it. There was noted in there an excess of expenditures over budget, and that's entirely as a result of budgeting the on-behalf payments, the amount the state kicks into TRS on behalf of the district. Otherwise, you are right on your budget, so you're setting out your financial plan and you're sticking to it. Operationally, we had no comments related to internal control. The district is well-staffed and has excellent controls. You're fortunate enough that you have enough people in your business office that you can do things correctly, and we're happy to see that. Audit went smoothly. You have a great crew, Mr. Welton and his staff do an excellent job. So that was about it. Any questions for me?
I always point out the pension thing, so you already covered all this. You got it all though, but thank you. Okay, great. I'm glad somebody's looking at that number. So, all right, thank you. Good night. You're welcome.
Next report is summer facility projects. Chris?
We have Frank Hsu, our facility director, to discuss the summer projects.
Excuse me. All right, it's that time of year where we talk about the adjustments to the 10-year capital projects plan and our recommendations for next summer. The 10-year plan hasn't changed significantly other than finishing off last year's work, adding a few items on and moving things over a year. We continue to have a large amount of work seen out there in the future for Lincoln School that hasn't been identified for a time or a funding source, and some projects at Churchville and elsewhere that have kind of been deferred for a while. Other than that, it's the same 10-year plan that you've seen repeatedly over the years. I'm hoping this year in working with JCI and White on a long-term district facilities plan that this document might look a little different when we see it next year. But right now, it's pretty much the same laundry list of items that you've seen in the past. The recommendations for next summer are fairly modest, totaling $1.3 million in work. A lot of this tuck pointing and roofing at a few locations, York, Emerson, and Jackson, and as well as Sandburg. One thing that might draw interest is I have a question mark next to boiler room at Madison for abatement. We need to abate for asbestos the tunnels at Madison where the water piping is. Some of that piping has begun leaking on a regular basis, and it's expensive or difficult to repair that while the asbestos is there. So we definitely are going to abate all that piping. If the budget allows for us to tackle the casings on the boilers at that time, we will. But if not, those casings are in good shape. It can wait until whatever time we decide to replace those boilers. Hawthorne downspout replacements have resulted in some water incursion in one of the classrooms, but unfortunately it's kind of a complex job because it's old cast iron piping that runs through multiple parts of old and new construction. And replace a boiler or chiller. And then the last item on the list is the manufacturing lab at York, which is proposed to be funded on this capital list. But the thought on that budget number you see there is that the purchasing and work would be done through district employees and not contracted out. So that saves us some money and allows us to get that job completed within the $1.3 million budgeted for next year. So that is the very quick wrap up of the recommendations for next summer and where we are with the 10-year plan. So if there's any questions.
Yeah, it's just, I'm trying to write the 1315 number here versus the 10-year plan, which has a 1185 number.
The 10-year plan does not include the manufacturing lab.
Okay. And what are we've been kicking a lot of stuff down the road every year. I mean, obviously we have to fit it into a number which we thought we were going to have from the TIF surplus. That's another discussion. But what are we not doing? Well, I mean, I know it's layered in later.
Right. I don't know if we're not doing anything. We have a number of projects at Churchville, which currently kind of is sitting at 2020. Some of those are needed, with the parking lot probably being the most obvious of those, with down to more desirable and just improvements and modernization that need to take place at that building. Right now we have the Lincoln projects is kind of warehoused in 2021. That's a large number. There's large issues at Lincoln. I don't see that we would have an unexpected 2021 funding source for that. That's just where they kind of sit right now. So I think the parking lot at Churchville is one that's been pushed down the road quite a bit. And then at Lincoln, there's masonry, there's roofs, there's plumbing, there's the boilers, there's the HVAC delivery. There's the large number of projects at Lincoln which are past their kind of ideal.
But stuff that this summer that you otherwise, I mean, are we deferring anything that's going to cost more by doing it next summer? Or, I mean,
no,
the year after?
Keeping the summer small was just if we're not tackling those two buildings, we're staying on pace with our roofs and masonry needs around the district. We've, other major repairs that are needed are being done. So I don't think, other than at those two schools, there's anything that we're pushing back.
Okay. And
Frank, I think, Chris, I'm sorry, but I think before we lose sight of this, I think it would be helpful if you explained the reason why the Churchville parking lot has been slated for 2020. I mean, that was by design.
Well, sure. A couple things. One of the hopes with the Churchill parking lot was to have the funding to redesign the parking lot and redo the area in front, not just to repave. The parking lot as it sits now covers a lot of acreage for very little parking. It's not an efficient design. And of course we have the drive-through with the overhang that gets hit by trucks on a routine basis. So, which we'd love to eliminate that structurally, kind of fix up the front of the building so it has a different looking entrance and have a completely different parking lot. So that makes it more expensive than, say, the similar project that we recently completed at Sandburg. The hope was that there was some TIF funding coming down the line which would make a project of that magnitude affordable. I don't know where we are with that.
Yeah, the Churchville and Fisher both were addendums in the TIF for IGA with the list of projects.
Right, and the city committed to the extent that there is surplus available, make a portion of that available to us to do that, and it's still ramping. It hasn't generated surplus yet, I don't think. The other point here is outside of the manufacturing lab, everything in here is the bare minimum to keep everything going. There's 1.5 million square feet in the district, and the typical in commercial real estate rule of thumb is $1 a foot a year, and so that's $1.5 million just to keep the place running with roofs and tuck pointing and stuff like that. We're spending slightly less than that, and we're also squeezing the manufacturing lab in, right?
Correct.
So I mean, nobody's getting luxurious
right.
new anything.
And the other item that's going to happen, and we'll probably see a change over the next couple of years in how the out years on the 10-year needs list looks, is we've been benefiting for a number of years of having 714,000 square feet of that square footage is at York, and has run as less than the normal amount for capital improvement over the last 10 to 15 years because most of the building was fairly new. Right. Now, as we start to look at chillers and mechanical units and things that start to move from being 5 to 10 years old to 10 to 20 years old, some of that's going to change, and might have to change kind of our calculus as to what our yearly capital needs are in general. But as far as basic building envelope and plumbing and HVAC needs on a year-to-year basis, with York having been so new, the demands have been a little bit lighter than what would be, say, average.
Last question, Welton, where's the money coming from?
We're doing a transfer from the operations and maintenance fund.
So fund balance?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
The third year of transfer from, that we 2 or 3 years from fund balance? Yeah, 3? Okay. Third year. Okay, thanks, Frank.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we have standards-based reporting. There's a pilot right now, and Mary will give an update.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really pleased to be joined tonight by 2 of our school principals, Tim Reardon from Hawthorne, Heidi Thomas from Field, Dr. Christina Pedraza, who is the assistant principal at both Hawthorne and Lincoln. We have our instructional coach from Field, Katie Murphy, and then 2 of our teachers, Annie Perrone, first grade teacher at Hawthorne, and Val Baxter, 4th grade teacher at Field. So they're going to be helping me out a little bit tonight. So I'm here to provide you an update on the pilot we have been doing this year on standards-based reporting. And our purpose is to review the pilot with you, talk about some of the lessons we've learned along the way and some of the feedback that we've gathered from teachers and from parents, and then talk about the next steps as we prepare to implement standards-based reporting at all of our K-5 schools next year. So when we talk about why change, why would we change a grading system that we used when we were going through schools and that has been around for many, many years? One of the reasons is our current student progress report, which is known as an SPR. You'll hear parents say SPRs, teachers refer to them as SPRs. Our current progress report is not aligned to any sort of standards, nor is it aligned to our current district curriculum. So when I joined the district last year, that was one of the very first and frequent frustrations I heard from our teachers, is that the two just don't align anymore. Additionally, the current grading system, and I've talked to the board about this before, right now what our current grading system does, it trains kids to focus on earning a grade. Okay, the endpoint, a grade, versus what am I learning? Have I learned all of the essential content for this course? We've talked about how grades in the current system take into account things like extra credit or academic behaviors instead of being solely focused on, did the student master the essential content? And then finally, something that we all know as educators, as parents, is that students learn at different rates. And the current system, grading system in place, doesn't take into account that students move along the learning continuum at a different rate. We have our unit test at the end of a unit, and then we move on with the content. And if you didn't get it, well, we hope that you're going to pick it up along the way, versus a standards-based system that's going to continue to circle back with that particular child and give them additional practice and reinforcement and support and provide them additional opportunities to show their learning. So we're going to start with Heidi Thomas, who's going to talk about some of the work that has gone into the pilot. No,
okay.
I can't.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I can't manage the clicker, no. So some of the pieces that have already been in place when we look at the pilot is that information was provided to the parents at both Hawthorne and Field in the winter of 2017, as well through some PTA meetings, some Talk 205s, and some informational sharing sessions. We also offered sessions for staff in August for some professional learning opportunities around building the understanding about that and looking at proficiency skills as well. At Fields and Hawthorne, we offered a joint session at York, Tim Reardon and Ms. Pedraza and I, to share further information about standard-based reporting with the parents that were in attendance there. And in our PTA meetings in the fall, we've offered some information as well as some coffee talks with parents so they could attend and ask questions and have some look at some of our proficiency skill pieces and what that looks like for them. We continued professional learning with one of our Marzano consultants as well for all the grade levels to be released from both Hawthorne and Field to work together and learn more about those pieces and look at some of the development and closer look at proficiency skills. And then at both Hawthorne and Field, many of the late arrivals over this fall were attributed to spending time digging into the standards, having teams work together to understand and to help to align what our curriculum is with our content standards and make sure that they have that understanding. Parent guides were made available to parents with the report card. And then we've also provided release time to work with our instructional coaches for our staff in order to help them to gain more confidence in working through this pilot.
Great, thank you, Heidi. Tim?
So Heidi talked about what we've done up to this point, and I'm briefly going to discuss what we are currently working on and what that professional learning is going to look like moving forward. So the things that we're really going to we're focusing on a lot now, and a lot of this work is happening during our PLCs and, like Heidi said, late starts and things like that. And so we're going to start continue to unpack the learning standards and have a clear understanding of what the standards mean and how we actually meet those standards. One of the things that the teams at Hawthorne have been doing a really good job this year is when we come to our PLC meetings, they bring examples of student work, and we talk about this is what this student, this is a 2, and here's why. This is what meeting the standard looks like, and here's why. This student exceeded the standard, and here's why, based off of the work they produce and proficiency scales. We're also looking at, and this is some of the work that like Dave Beatty and Mrs. Tamru are doing with CDT teams and the instructional coaches, is looking at our current assessments and making sure that we have assessments that really, truly, accurately measure the standards and have questions that are aligned with the standards so we can accurately look at the data and make sure that we're getting the information that we need. And then finally, continued learning for teachers on conferring and guided reading and how to use the data gathered to determine the mastery of standards. And the reason why that's really important is because we're trying to get away from the intrusive assessment where you stop teaching for the day, everybody takes an assessment that day, and that's what they do for that hour or 45 minutes or however long it takes. So when the teachers are either doing like one-to-one conferring or meeting with kids in small groups, they're getting the information that they need to see whether or not the student is meeting the standards, and then the other students are practicing skills during independent reading and things like that, so they can continue to learn. So that's one of the big focuses too, is not stopping instruction to test kids. We want to have that learning happening all the time. Thank you.
Great. So one of the things you heard Mr. Reardon mention are PLCs, which are professional learning communities, and that is the opportunity for our teachers to come together in grade levels at the elementary to collaborate on looking at instruction, typically in literacy and math. And Katie Murphy, who's the coach at Field, is going to talk to you a little bit about how she has seen the PLCs change and shift as standards-based reporting has come into play.
So I'm fortunate enough to work with each grade level on a weekly basis. I go to their PLCs, and since last year and coming into this year, piloting standards-based reporting, the conversations have totally shifted. Conversations about student work and using student work to look at the standards and to find evidence for those specific standards is really the focus of our PLCs now. And as a grade level, they're problem solving together, which is awesome to see. They've created common formative assessments to look at the results together. They're not looking at them as an individual teacher anymore. They're looking at them as a grade level and problem solving. How can we get the student to meet proficiency at that specific standard? They're making instructional decisions together as a team, which is awesome to see. And our focus in our PLCs now have shifted from learning rather than just teaching. And we've, as a whole school, have really dug into the standards and have a huge understanding of what the standards are and how to move our students forward to show proficiency for those standards.
Thanks, Katie. When you hear Katie talking about how teachers are planning together, looking at data together, looking at work together, that's such a critical aspect, because when you think about a grade level of teachers, you may have a first-year teacher on the team as well as a seasoned veteran, and to be able to come together and to learn from each other and value each other's experiences really is a benefit to all of our kids. So next I'm going to ask Annie Perrone, who is one of our first grade teachers at Hawthorne, and she's going to share with you a little bit of her experience this year.
Thank you. Our new standards-based report card has positively impacted the conversations I have with the students in my classroom. The students are part of determining what proficiency looks like based off of a standard. It gives the discussions meaning for them and drives their learning. During and at the end of lessons, students rate themselves using proficiency cubes that have a 4, 3, 2, and 1 on them. The numbers have more significance to the students compared to the grades on our previous report card. They can self-assess as well as understand where and what they need to do to demonstrate proficiency. I initially introduced the scales to my first graders during math. Following that lesson, we transitioned to writing. After the mini lesson, a student raised his hand and asked me what a 3 would look like in their writing. Instead of telling him what I thought, I asked them what they think would constitute a 3. They were able to discuss what to expect to find in a story that was a 3 and then continued to a 4 and a 2. When they started working independently, they were able to justify in their writing what elements made it a 3 or what they needed to improve upon. Using the proficiency scales has allowed my first graders to have meaningful academic discussions that drive their learning.
I just want to reinforce, Annie said it a couple times, but those were first graders that we're talking about. And now I'd like to invite Valerie Baxter up, who's a 4th grade teacher at Field, to talk a little bit about the experience from the intermediate perspective.
Sure.
I think to understand the intermediate experience is to understand that at 4th and 5th grade levels last year or prior to this, the students switched to an ABCDF model of grading. So they moved from the EM and R, exceeds, meets, and requires more time, to letter grades, more traditional. Those letter grades, when they would get their report card, they'd have math, and it'd be a B. Literacy, it'd be an A, whatever that grade might be. So the standards for us switched to being more descriptive, and we have 8 to 10 descriptors in math. We have 8 to 10 descriptors in literacy that we look at each student, and we assess them 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for me, I switched from 2nd grade last year to 4th grade this year, so I was used to that idea of a list of different descriptors and things like that, not necessarily tied to the standards, but I was used to grading that. So I think that was a little bit of an easier switch for me than some of my colleagues. But with any change, it takes time and understanding and a lot of conversation. So as we've shifted our instruction this year, our grade books look much different. How we record our grades for a variety of the report card descriptors has changed to multiple pages rather than just 1 or 2 for each subject. As teachers, we've spent a lot of time working on understanding those descriptors, building proficiency scales, and making sure we are assessing each of those standards and the content matches what we're supposed to be working on for that trimester. Finally, we're making sure that we're also communicating that to the students as well as their parents. With the proficiency scales and rubrics, we can give credit for thinking that may be correct, but ultimately end up with the wrong answer. So for example, if we have a multi-digit multiplication problem on a math test, the student may have all of those multiplication steps correct, but when they go to add the final answer, they may make one little misstep, but I can give them credit for knowing all of those answers and just making that careless error. In the past, we would have had to mark them down and they would have gone down in their percentage on their test. So we're able to honor that they're learning what we're supposed to be doing. The students as well as the parents needed to be guided on conversations as we have shifted our grading model. We've had numerous conversations in class about shifting and what the shifting of grading meant, and those conversations will definitely continue. But one of the most powerful things that is done in my classroom is we're continuously talking about that learning continuum and what does it mean to be proficient, which is a 3. These conversations happen before, during, and after instruction on a topic, and they have a better idea of what they're doing, how they're doing, and what they can do to do more and do better. We use the analogy in our classroom of learning to ride a bicycle. So our descriptors are 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is beginning. So you can ride a bike, but you need training wheels. 2 is approaching. You can ride a bike, but you occasionally need somebody to help you on the back, maybe steer you a little bit. Proficient, you can ride the bike, you can start it, you can stop it, you can steer all you need to, you can go into grass, you can go on cement, you've got it. And 4 exceeding is you can do tricks on that. You can pop a wheelie, you can ride the rails, all those types of things. So I found the most powerful activity that we've done in class is I've had students developing the proficiency scale. So we're going to do an activity and they talk about what a 3 looks like, what a 2 would look like, and what a 1 would look like. They're a lot harder than we are on some of those. And we frequently use the phrase, how can you pop a wheelie on that subject in class? This has also promoted the conversation of growth mindset and that we all move through levels of beginning to proficient as we learn. And to move through those levels, you need support and you need to work hard. But everyone can move through those levels. They just might not be able to do it yet. And my students know that yet is one of the most powerful words that we have. The standards-based grading honors that learning, goes through a process of beginning, developing, proficient to exceeding.
Thank you, Val. In December, Katie Murphy, our instructional coach, and Dr. Pedraza, the assistant principal, worked with all of the grade level teachers from Hawthorne and Field to really look from beyond first trimester into second trimester and to look at what kinds of evidence would the teachers like to have of meeting the standards. So during that time, Katie and Christina were collecting feedback from teachers. So Christina's going to share a little bit of what our teachers from Field and Hawthorne are thinking about standards-based.
So we wanted to make sure that as we were going through this process, we were reflecting on it because we knew that we were piloting this, but also we were going to be responsible for sharing that information and what we've learned with the other schools. So Katie and I developed some questions to ask the teachers about What went well this first trimester? What did you learn? What do you want to do differently? What would it benefit the other non-pilot schools to know? And then what do parents need to know? And so from that came a lot of information. But this slide is just kind of a summary of it. And I think that the first quote at the top is really the best summation. The font's a little bit small because we got a lot of information, so I'm going to read it out loud to you if you want to follow along. But it says, we definitely like using the SBR better than our previous SPR because it is better aligned with our learning targets. We found that we all took a deeper look into our learning targets as far as instructional strategies, assessment, and intervention. We were able to really get to know how each of our students learn best. And I think that that really speaks to the power of standards-based reporting. Additionally, they felt like kids just made a lot of progress and they had a better understanding of what a 4, 3, 2, and 1 was as opposed to just the SPR grade, that the students really clearly understood what was the target that they were going for, and that aligns with that other work that we've been doing in the district. So this is just a nice progression. Additionally, they really are valuing that collaboration time. They've enjoyed having that time to work together, to talk about the standards, to look at student work, to have those dialogues. But they would like continued professional development to continue to deepen their understanding and their knowledge of the standards themselves and of the scales. Some of the advice that they would give to non-pilot schools was, look at the trimester as a whole before the actual trimester begins so they know what evidence they're collecting, what are the assessments, what are the outcomes that they're looking for with students, and that communication with parents is really key about the grading system and making sure that you are really having open communication where the parents are seeing, are their students getting the 4, 3, 2, and 1? What does that mean? What does that look like for the individual grade levels? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Christina. So you've heard some of the feedback from teachers, our teachers here in person, and from the work with Christina and Katie. One of the other steps that was really important was to gather feedback from the parents. So after the first trimester report cards went home, we did a survey with our Field and Hawthorne families. We had 89 families participate in this survey, which is probably about maybe a little more than 10% of our families. So it wasn't a huge response. However, we value all the feedback, so we still look at it very carefully. There were some initial questions that were a little more what I would call logistical in nature, things about the format of the report card, accessing the report card, easy to read, those types of things that were on a Likert scale, where parents were selecting where they fell. So the questions about accessing the report card on PowerSchool, we actually did it 2 ways. Hawthorne made it only available via PowerSchool, which our secondary schools do, and then Field printed it as we typically do with our elementary report cards. So we wanted to do that to see the difference. There was a high percentage of parents who found it very easy to access the report card on PowerSchool. Only 17% disagreed or strongly disagreed with that. 50% of the parents who took the survey strongly agreed that the report card gave them sufficient information about their child's academic performance. There were some who fell in the neutral category, and 38% who disagreed or strongly disagreed. And then 58% of parents who took the survey strongly agree that the report card gives them some sufficient information about their child's learning behaviors. And that includes things about following directions, being responsible, those types of learning and academic behaviors. Again, we had some fall in the neutral category, and 35% disagreed or strongly disagreed. And then we had a parent guide that we had developed and made available, and 56% of the parents who took the survey found that the parent guide addressed their questions. Some, again, in the neutral category, and 32% who disagreed or strongly disagreed. So those were the Likert scale questions. And to my knowledge, this is the first time that we've ever surveyed parents on the report card, both the content, the formatting. I could not find any evidence where we had surveyed parents before. And this was the old report card system was a very large source of teacher frustration because it just no longer matched their teaching. But the last question on the survey was written as additional thoughts I would like to share. So very broad, very open-ended, so that parents were able to share any type of feedback that they were hoping to. And 49 out of the 89 parents shared feedback. So some of the broad themes from that, there are parents who still aren't clear on the difference between meeting the standard, which is the target, and exceeding the standard. So as we go through all of these, what I take from the feedback is still a great need to better educate our parents and continue our professional learning for our teachers, and I'll talk through some of those in more detail. We definitely need additional opportunities for parents to better understand standards-based reporting in general and how that differs from traditional grading systems with percentages and letter grades. We still need to continue our professional learning for teachers. Some of the comments in the survey referenced that it didn't seem to be consistent among teachers, and that to me tells me that we need to bring the level of understanding up for everybody. So again, that goes for professional learning. And there really was a true mix of comments from parents who just really loved the new report card, not just the format, but what they felt was the amount of information they were getting, and comments who felt like, and parents who felt like they didn't get enough information. So it was really interesting how there were these really divergent perspectives on the amount of information that they are getting. So when you get feedback, you need to respond to that. You need to think through what you're going to do with that. One of the things that we really are trying to better understand is what is the most effective way to engage our parents. Heidi and Tim have referenced coffees they did, PTA meetings. Some of those are during the day, some are in the evening. We did a meeting at York for all parents at the start of the year, and not a lot of attendance. So that doesn't seem to be the way that's most meaningful for parents. Certainly we could do a website. However, one of the things we find is that there's a need, particularly with this work that we're doing, for two-way conversation, for parents to be able to ask their question and for you to really give specific examples to that question. So while a website could help somewhat, I don't think it's the most effective way. So one of the ways we're responding to the feedback is that Tim and Heidi will be working with their PTA to really reach out and see how can we better engage our parents in this conversation so that they're feeling more comfortable with the old system. Because we see two things. One is helping parents understand the difference between meeting the standard and being on target and exceeding the standard. And then the other is with any type of learning, whether you're a child or an adult, we always try and connect new learning to what we already know. And what our parents know already is traditional grading systems. So in some of the feedback and comments, I could see where the parents are trying to fit standards-based reporting into the context of what they know. So to just be able to find ways to engage with them to help them better understand the new system. We are continuing our professional learning for teachers, and then before the standards-based report cards go home the second trimester, we're going to update the parent guide to address some of these common themes that we found in the feedback. So as we move to full implementation at our elementary schools next year, here are some of the things that you can anticipate. Field and Hawthorne staff will continue to give us feedback. There's a lot of aspects. There's technology aspects. There's wording of standards that teachers have given us great feedback on how we need to tweak and adjust that. Looking at the timing of which trimester we'll be assessing particular standards. So that's all really valuable feedback our Hawthorne and Field teachers are giving us. We will be surveying our parents again in the spring. We'll be updating that parent guide, as I mentioned. For our remaining elementary schools who are not pilot schools, their professional learning will begin in February at our second late arrival. They will all be getting some consistent PD on standards-based reporting. During the winter, We'll be having our second round of grade level meetings. That's something that occurs every year about 3 times. All of the teachers at a particular grade level are invited to a meeting. Our principals divide up and kind of take ownership of a grade level. Tim has our 3rd grade. So all the 3rd grade teachers go to Hawthorne after school for a meeting. So our field and Hawthorne staff will be asked to share some of their grade level specific experiences with standards-based reporting, so that their colleagues who are in non-pilot schools have that opportunity to ask those questions and get involved. And then we'll have continued learning opportunities for our teachers during the spring and over the summer. While we're really just looking at K-5 for next year, some of the questions in the feedback survey raised issues and worries about secondary. So I just wanted to add a quick slide just to kind of address how it looks at the secondary level. So next year, all of our schools at K-5 will be implementing. Our 6th grade teachers will begin learning. The following year, K-5 continues. Those 5th graders and 5th grade parents who now have had a year of standards-based reporting will move up to 6th grade, where it will be implemented. We'll continue that way at middle school, implementing 1 year at a time. As the principals talked, as we've talked with teachers, we felt like to implement it at middle school any other way would cause a lot of angst and worry with both our kids and our parents. If you've used a traditional grading system and then in 8th grade, just before you transition to high school, you move to standards-based. We just didn't feel like that was going to be an effective means of doing that. And then high school, we already have some high school departments and teachers doing some standards-based reporting in their classroom. So rather, we won't wait probably until 2022, 23 to start things at the high school. I'll continue to work with our department chairs and our leaders at the high school to look at how we'll refine and expand on that. But when kids move to a secondary level, what's typically used in districts who use standards-based reporting is a hybrid model. So you do get a letter grade, you do have a GPA. Until colleges stop using GPAs, we can't get around that, and we're not going to try to get around that. But there also will be that expanded report of standards reported on for each of those subject areas. And we as a group would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions from board members? Do you want to start, Margaret?
First off, I wanted to say thank you to the team. They all are up here. And I really wanted to kind of focus in on the feedback and the responding to feedback. Because you said it, I'm just going to repeat it, you know, how important the feedback is, that we're taking it, and how you've illustrated, once you get that feedback, how we're responding and putting that information in. So I think that's really critical, and it's really important, and thank you for illustrating that and showing how that will be done. I also want to appreciate, call to mind the implementation plan and how this is going to look, so people have information on what this looks like as it rolls out. So it's not just what 2017-18 looked like. You've gone all the way up to 2022. 2021-22. So thank you for sharing that information with us. And please keep the information coming, because sometimes the challenge is, even though you told us once, we're all very busy people. We forget that you've told us. And so you have to keep telling us what you've already told us.
Right. Happy to do that.
I'm going to start with the last thing you said and go backwards.
Okay.
Because I'd be one of those parents who say, wait a second, high school, GPA, college, how is that going to work? So I'm going to take, and when my children were at York, we did standards-based reporting at some of the courses. So thank you, first off, I will say, for showing us the comprehensive view throughout the unit district, which is what we're all about, right?
Yes.
So thank you. And so, because that would be my thought process, is how do we work it through the system? So that's the first thing that's coming to mind. Thank you for sharing about the parents and the teacher feedback. But once again, the questions are more around you know, one thing pilot, another full-blown implementation with other things that are being implemented. So just kind of give me a sense of how we manage through, not manage through that, how do we thrive through that?
Thrive through that and support our teachers. They're on the front lines of implementing these changes. So I think that's a great question. Anytime it comes to reporting out student progress, that is an added stressor for teachers at that time of year. If I'm wrong, okay, that is an added stressor. What has been really difficult the last few years as we've had new curriculum is they're trying to take this curriculum that's aligned to the standards and figure out where to fit it in with a reporting system that isn't aligned to any standards. And then saying, oh, well, we really don't do this anymore, so either we have to decide leave it blank, which is not a great feeling for teacher or parent, or come up with a random assessment to do something not necessarily connected to the curriculum. So I would be a liar if I said this isn't hard work. It is very hard work. But it's work that is connected to the curriculum and student learning that we're already focusing on. So it's hard work that has a real purpose. Ladies, would you say anything else? Okay.
Well, the piece that, correct me if I'm saying it differently, but I know that as you're in the classrooms and you are looking at all your students and you're trying to assess where they all are, you know, all 20, 30, whatever students are, and how do you meet them and how do you grow them all, right? It seems as though this helps you do that, and so it's more integrated, everything that you do, not let me instruct what we need to instruct to the students, you know, get the students to learn, then I got to figure out how to assess them all and then figure out on the fly, kind of, that's how, you know, some of the things that you've shared with professional development of how do I group, who do I group. So it seems as though this is all more organically integrative to the work that you're doing, and assessment is not just something that I have to do at the end, but it's all integrated. You're all shaking your head.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
This fits the model of instruction that our teachers are using.
So to the high school GPA.
Yes,
and
it's not going away.
standards-based reporting. So did I hear you correctly that until, you know, the whole college thing and all that goes on, it's kind of a parallel thing?
Correct. So it's a hybrid model. So you still have a single letter grade for each of your subjects, but along with that, you have the standards that the students have been assessed on during that grading period, where they'll have a 4, 3, 2, or 1. So you'll see much more at a secondary level than what you typically would see.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, so then me as a parent, because I'm uncomfortable, I want to know what that's like at every grade. I'm just going to say it. You know, what do we...
Right, and so that's why we're moving it up.
First of all, I love the way you're rolling it out, getting feedback, working on that. I want to start with something with high school to just follow on. So some classes and departments are using the standards-based recording, but there hasn't been any education for students or parents.
Okay.
So is that something that you could work on with
Absolutely.
high school? Because there's, I think, a lot of confusion on, you know, how does the letter grade and the standard meet? And so there's that. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Then I'm just kind of curious about the actual, I guess I would call it report card. If I'm looking at my student's report card in math and they're in 4th grade, about how many standards are there?
About 8 to 10.
8 to 10, like per trimester?
Yeah, it depends on the trimester, but yes.
Okay. Do you, and this might be a question for you. I'll be kind, I won't pick on you.
I promise that I warned them ahead of time that you are so kind to teachers.
You know, I was a teacher and I know the amount of work. Do you find it overwhelming, like to go through and, you know, really, you know, address, I mean, 10 standards for math times
25 to 28 kids, you know, that's a lot. But do you find it, I guess, is it so beneficial that it's worth the paperwork part of it? Or do you just, I think you need to come to the microphone.
You're such a seasoned presenter. You have to realize we switched over to Eureka. So that's a standards-based math program. Okay. So when we look at the different modules that we're completing, which module is the new term for unit, we have 8 to 10 descriptors that we're working on. So it's not as difficult. I mean, you happen to pick the easier subject. Reading and literacy is a little more tricky. I know as a 4th grade team, we're struggling with one of our descriptors this trimester is catching kids in dialogue and conversation. And where are they at with that? So, you know, as a team, we've batted back and forth, okay, how do we get to everybody? How do we listen in on conversations without kind of changing that dynamic as, you know, the teacher comes near you, and able to really assess how a student is doing with conversations with each other. So some of them are easier. Math happens to be an easier subject than literacy, at least for me. For some other people, it's not. But it's because our math program is so tightly aligned to the standards, so that helps. But yeah, it is a juggling.
Yeah.
But I also came from 2nd grade where we were doing a ton of descriptors, or like Annie had, you know, is doing a ton of descriptors as well. So for me, that was an easier shift than just putting a % on top of a test and going, okay, here's your grade. But again, it's also honoring that continuum of, you know what, you just might not be there yet.
Well, I love that. I love that, because you're not saying, oh, you don't know multiplication. You don't know it yet.
Right.
So,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you.
I'm done.
I'm done. I won't pick.
Well, and I think the other piece of that is, you know, in a traditional grading system, you average all the grades together. So it puts the same weight on the learning and assessment done when you're first introduced to a concept or skill as you did at the end. Where in a standards-based system, you can weight more heavily end of unit, end of skill learning, so that you're really measuring what has the child learned. Not in a sense penalizing them because they didn't know it the first time that there was an assignment or a task or an assessment.
Just had a question to follow up on that. So at the end of the grading period, you assess the standards, the 8 or 10 standards.
You do. If I am a teacher who's using PowerSchool, which is our system that generates our report cards and so many other things, if I'm a teacher who puts my grades in all along the way, we have the system set up where it weights those later learning experiences, and it will automatically calculate a 4, 3, 2, 1. And then teachers just have that opportunity to look at that and say, okay, is that really where the child is?
Thank you again for all of you guys. I've had kids go through this at York, and I can tell you that it's lowered the stress level for them immensely. If I could figure out when the light bulb went on with them all the time, it would be great. It always goes on at a different time, and these kind of approach really makes them feel less of a gotcha and more of an objective kind of, hey, I'm trying to learn something. One question, I mean, to that end, you know, ultimately we talk about making students responsible for their education. What's their feedback?
I did ask my class that today. Because I told them I was coming to the board to speak about the report cards, and it was mixed. They're still trying, what Mary talked about, they're still trying to wrap their heads around EM&R, and how does that fit into the standards. And they're also, exceeding is harder to achieve now. So they're also trying to figure out, well, how do I pop that wheelie? What are the expectations? What are the things that we can do? So at least I'm finding my 4th graders are still kind of struggling. So we're continuing those dialogues all the time about, okay, what does this mean? Is a 3 okay? Which, that's our target. So 3 is perfectly what we want. Level. So, okay, is a 2 okay then? You know, and we kind of batted that around in our conversation. So it's still taking them shifting out of EM and R to figure out, okay, what's 1, 2, 3, 4 then? They don't have, some of them, very few of them have had siblings that have had, have older siblings that have gone through that traditional model. So a couple of them have that in their head as well, but they're trying to figure it out still. They're getting there, but.
Is there a method to kind of more formally assess their opinion or gather their opinion and use it. I mean, you talked about feedback. I'm telling you, if you can make these kids advocates, because my kids teach me all kinds of stuff. And when I say I don't know, they go, hey, Dad, let me explain it to you. Great advocate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way to capture that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely something we can work into, gathering feedback from all of our different stakeholder groups.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then one last just technical thing. I know a lot of parents work and are busy and whatnot, and you talk about coffees and maybe not. Do we have the capability to do like a WebEx or Skype or something when you talk about two-way? I do that at work all the time.
Yeah, we definitely could.
And there's a way to do it in a unified fashion where it's not a free-for-all, where you queue questions and answer. I just would ask to look at that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because that's in the conversations with Tim and Heidi, that's where we really need to think outside what we've done traditionally to reach parents, because again, this topic in particular really needs that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And just, you know, one-dimensional information is not beneficial.
Right.
So I think that's an excellent idea that we can explore. Okay. Thank you. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you for coming. Okay, there was a committee meeting last month for learning and teaching. Jim Collins isn't here today, so I asked Kara if she could give an update on the committee meeting. Thanks.
So the Learning and Teaching Committee met on December 13th for a couple of hours, and the 3 board members on the committee are Jim Collins and Dr. Harrell and myself, and Dr. Harrell wasn't able to make it, and Jim Collins isn't here tonight, so I'm up. So the Learning and Teaching Committee met with the purpose of just providing another opportunity to discuss the proposed middle school reorganization. So there were 4 board members present. Karen and John joined as well, and administrators. And so we talked for about 2.5 hours and had some parents present as well who joined in the conversation. So all the notes are on board docs, so I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but we just sort of touched on all the main concerns and talked through to make sure administrators and board and, you know, we just really talked through them so that everyone's aware of the concerns that parents and the community has. The first one that we discussed was acceleration, and the main concern seemed to be that many parents were concerned about the rigor, or, you know, what were the kids really engaged in learning during this time. And so, you know, there's been a parent survey to get more feedback, and there's an acceleration committee that's made up of administrators and it's my understanding, any middle school teachers that want to be on that committee can be a part of that as well. And so they meet each month to improve the process and refine it. So it's an ongoing, just ongoing process to make it, you know, meet the needs each month and try to accomplish the goals. And the board members again reiterated that, you know, the community has repeatedly said that they want to see more STEM. And so the acceleration time is a perfect opportunity to integrate more STEM into the day. And so that was noted by administration, and I think they're working to try and find ways to get that into the acceleration units. So there were other points about acceleration that were discussed, but I'm not going to go into all that detail. It's available on the document. We also discussed band, orchestra, choir, moving it to the day. In particular, how that affects special ed students and students that take a guided study and therefore only currently have one option for an elective. So by moving band to the day, they would have to either, if they stayed in guided study, they would have to choose between band or unified arts. So we discussed that, and that really is a discussion to happen in the child's IEP meeting and work out what can be done to best meet the needs of that student. And also there were concerns about maintaining full ensembles. So there's a concern that if band is moved to the day, that you wouldn't be able to have 6th through 8th grade meet all at once every day. So that was discussed as well. The next topic was world language. So this is a change in how it's going to be delivered, but the biggest point that I think we all agreed on is there has to be a huge parent education piece to the world language, because especially if you don't have a high schooler, it's important to understand what kids in high school need if they plan to go to college. Some schools require 3 years of language at high school, some require 2. So it's just important that the middle school parents are really educated, and we're emphasizing that to the administration to do that, just so that they really understand when they're going to make that choice with their kids and the parents, that they, it's not that you can't change, but just so you understand what you might need in high school, and maybe that opens some options in middle school, potentially. Next, guidance. There was seemed to be maybe a misunderstanding about guidance. I'm not sure, but it is coming out of the Unified Arts Wheel, but it's not being eliminated. It's just being incorporated into the health time and whatever other learning times that the guidance counselors who are currently working on the social emotional learning feel that it can be integrated into the curriculum. Because really, social emotional, I think the goal is to get it going all year long, not just for a few weeks of the year. And lastly, STEM. So there were questions regarding Project Lead the Way, and why couldn't Project Lead the Way be a unified arts offering, which the answer to that is it has to be a semester long. But also, could there be STEM offering during acceleration time? And so Dr. Moyer had shared that the district is piloting something called Defined STEM in some classes, which is a little bit similar to Project Lead the Way, a little more of like a mini unit. Is that right? And so that potentially could be incorporated into acceleration times in the future. So there's a little more detail on the board docs in the notes. The PTA Council, this is just kind of as a follow-on, the PTA Council is hosting a town hall meeting on the proposed middle school changes January 16th at York. The administration will do a review of the proposal. They will address the top questions and concerns, and then the PTA Council is going to facilitate a question and answer with parents and administrators. So that's on January 16th at York in the Commons. And then there's also a website. I don't know what the website is or how you get there for the middle school that has more answers to questions. So it was a really nice discussion, lots of good questions addressed, and yeah, that's it. Any questions?
What I can do, Kate, if I can share this link with you for the middle school website, and we can put it front and center on the district webpage.
I have a question. So we had the board meeting on December 12th, and you presented, and then next day, Learning and Teaching Committee meeting. So how has the presentation changed for next week based on feedback from those two meetings? When you're talking with teachers, I'm just wondering what other pieces have gone into the presentation for next week.
Well, that's a little bit, it's not complete. So I'm going to answer this as best I can, because Mary is still working with some of the music teachers to refine a couple of the details, but we will explain some of the big ideas are similar, but we will explain in greater detail the actual implementation plan, and some of that will involve how we are handling concerns related to acceleration, different things that we talked about being able to do with Project Lead the Way in terms of perhaps some summer school enrichment classes and other things like that that came out of that discussion. And then the actual plan for how we would implement band, orchestra, and choir has evolved a little bit from the initial conversations in ways that we think the music teachers had indicated that they would be able to implement the original concept. So with some of the revisions based on parent feedback and some of the other things we've been hearing, we just want to make sure that we've communicated with them appropriately so that we can satisfy the fact that they're comfortable with some of the changes of how we think that implementation might be able to be a little smoother for families.
Questions? Okay, thanks, Kara. All right, we have superintendent's action items. Dual language program is the first of 3.
Okay, so the rationale is taken from the information in the proposal. The information in the proposal is more detailed, but I will read the rationale to put it into the record. As shared at the December 12, 2017 Board of Education meeting, the rationale for changing from a traditional transitional bilingual program, which is known as TBE, to dual language programming is based on both research and the results of our own District 205 students. Our trend student achievement data reflect an ongoing achievement gap for our bilingual students. The goal of a TBE program is to provide intensive support in English acquisition until a student exits the program based on state criteria. The first 2 years after exit, a student is monitored and is still in need of limited academic supports. In theory, after the 2-year monitoring phase, the student achievement of bilingual students should be commensurate with that of their monolingual peers. The reality is that the achievement gap not only continues, but it doesn't even narrow. A TBE program does not meet the needs of our students, and it is incumbent upon us to make changes and provide our bilingual students with the type of programming that will meet their needs. As such, the district is seeking approval to begin a 2-way immersion dual language program, Spanish-English, beginning with kindergarten in the 2018-19 school year. The program will begin at Conrad Fisher Elementary School and roll up 1 year at a time with full implementation grades K through 5 in the 2023-24 school year. I would also like to add that even though that rationale focuses on the needs of our English language learners, that, and we showed research on this in our proposal in December, it's a phenomenal enrichment opportunity to truly allow all students the opportunity to graduate bilingual, biliterate, bicultural, and it also the student achievement metrics show that all students who participate in this type of programming, by the time they reach their middle school years, outachieve their grade level peers, regardless of any other distinguishing factor, by an average of a full grade level, and that is the North Carolina study that we referenced. And so there are benefits for both the native English-speaking and native Spanish-speaking students that participate in this program, even though the rationale tends to focus, in this case, more on the native Spanish-speaking students. So that is the rationale. The recommendation is that the Board of Education approve a 2-way immersion dual language program, Spanish-English, so I read that part as well.
Okay. I need a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve a 2-way immersion dual language program, Spanish-English, beginning with kindergarten in the 2018-2019 school year, and roll up 1 year at a time with full implementation K-5 in the 2023-24 school year.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by John, second by Chris. Any discussion? Margaret?
Yeah. In the December 12th meeting, there were a couple of items that I had asked be provided, and you did provide them. But I'm just wondering, and so let me talk through about what those 3 items were. I asked that you provide information about space. People ask questions about space. I asked that you provide the information on space that some of the community members mentioned, and we followed up on. I asked that you provide some information on the implementation plan, what that would look like, and how the communication plan with the stakeholders. And then I also asked that you provide some information on the impact to the existing Conrad Fisher community, which obviously included both the native English speakers as well as the native Spanish speakers. Thank you very much. You provided all of that information for us to the board. I'm wondering, can you summarize that information in this meeting, so we can kind of talk through that, so that'll be on the record that we did provide that information and the community has that information and they know what the implementation plan looks like and how how they'll be able to provide feedback.
Okay. What other districts experience when they implement dual language is that after the first year or two, the demand exceeds the capacity for the program. And so some of the facility things that people have questioned, we do believe will be things that we have to work through maybe early on in the implementation, but will not be something that is going to be a major issue in future years. And I'm going to ask Jane, if you don't mind, could you please come up? I'm just going to give a brief introduction and then or a brief explanation, and then if she wants to add more details or people have additional questions. She has taken a look at her facility utilization currently. As we move toward more push-in services, we will be freeing up classroom space. And we also are a little bit uncertain exactly how many classrooms we will need, because until we see what the interest is for dual, both at Fisher and across the district, as well as the screening that we're doing at the Madison Early Childhood Center and which ones of those students would be appropriate for dual versus regular kindergarten and some of those other things. We can't say what we know the exact numbers are, but we have figured out a way to accommodate the space. And so, Jane, if you want to explain a little bit more about that.
Okay, so we're trying to plan for 5 kindergarten sections. Typically we have 4, 2 full day and 2 half day. So that takes up 3 classroom spaces. We're looking for 2 classrooms. What we're currently doing that's going to be beneficial is we're doing a lot of co-teaching. As a result of having a highly diverse population, we also have a good number of resource personnel. So special education teachers, we have 2.5. Reading specialists, we have 3. And EL resource supports, we have 4.5. Most of those people are working in a co-teaching model, actually pushing into the classroom, working on core instruction with modifications and accommodations for learning and language needs. And a lot of those rooms that are allocated for resource service, pull-out instruction, are really nothing more than office space. And so the proposal to get to the 5 rooms to address next year, right now I'm not planning for anything beyond next year, and that would be to take away some of those resource rooms, a couple of them, and allocate those to kindergarten. And there we kind of found some places in the building to make everything contiguous, as is typical in an elementary building. So kindergarten is all pretty well aligned and close together, and that continues through 5th grade. And then those resource personnel will not be housed in the parking lot, not to worry, we've got it covered. We will partner them with a classroom teacher where they're typically co-teaching and or providing acceleration. So they'll become an ELL expert in 3rd grade who's working with that team and providing those supports kind of unilaterally. So yes, there's lots of moving parts to it. There's no implementation that's not without growing pains, and this will be the growing pain, but I think it's going to prove to be worth it at the end of the day. Like by December, I think you'll see much more excitement than we have right this second as people, you know, settle into it and try it and it's working. I heard a parent whose child actually has participated in dual language for years and got a little confused in a special subject because it was only delivered in one language and she was waiting for the second. So I thought that was kind of an interesting reflection from a child. Questions, comments?
I would just add one thing to that. As I indicated, we think that some of these things that we're going to have to wrestle with the first year or two are going to be short-lived. If that does not prove to be true, we will take a look at how to refine the program and make sure that you know, we continue to analyze our operations, and we are going to continue our efforts in this district to do program analysis work, and that being a first-year program, there's various different things that we will look at throughout the implementation process, and so dual language would be, as a first-year program, something that we would want to put in the rotation out of the onset of implementation as part of the review process, and all of those things will be continuously monitored. But if it looks like we have to take a look at facility options in future years, we could do something like create a situation where we have programming at 2 schools and we have 2 strands at 2 different schools of dual, and that is a backup plan that we are looking at if we're not able to accommodate it at one site. The reason we're not interested in doing that initially is because we have speech therapists, reading specialists, other people like that that have to provide EL services and are bilingual. And so a lot of those different support services, if you run that program at 2 different sites, you increase your costs. But we do have backup options if it looks like we have to address space issues and are struggling to find ways to do that. Those are some of the reasons why we wanted to get this off the ground at one site before we took a look at whether or not it was a prudent move to commit to implementing at 2 different sites. And I know that the committee, Ariana couldn't be here today, but Jane was on the committee, and Mary has been intimately involved with these conversations. So there could be different things that they, you know, would be able to share or elaborate on from the work that the committee did that could give you more details. But generally speaking, a lot of these things have been considered and not only planned through in the first year, but then taking a look at what does that mean in years 2, years 3, what are the potential things that could happen, and how could we adjust to that if it looks like we're not able to continue to accommodate the program solely at one site.
Sorry. So thank you. So that was a lot of the conversation about the space issues, and thank you for that clarification about there are plans that if it's too much for one space, moving it to a different location, but some of the benefits of starting in one space at one school at the initial time. Can you talk us through the implementation or communication plan? I know you provided for the board a comprehensive plan about how you're talking to all the different stakeholders. I don't know how much of that can be made public or when it will be made public, but if you could share some of that.
It certainly can be.
It's in board docs now.
Yeah,
It's in board docs now, so all that implementation plan is available about how all the stakeholders will be when the meetings are, who will be there, who will communicate, the dates of the meetings, and how that information will be integrated in.
Yes, it's all there. I can have Mary review that briefly, but it is all there. And I would indicate too that all of our school sites, through the PTAs and the building principals, did send out information to all of the parents asking for people that were interested in serving on the dual language committee. And we had different types of planning that has occurred in terms of the last couple of years with visiting sites, studying different, studying different schools that have moved toward dual. So even though this particular document is moving forward in terms of what the next couple months would be, and even though the actual dual committee, based on some of our community feedback and the operational plan and different things that we have talked about over the last year or two with Focus 205, even though that dual language committee began its work this fall, there was still work in prior years that was going into studying how this could work in our district. But as far as moving forward, Mary, maybe you could just highlight a couple things from the document.
Sure. So in the document, where it has the meetings that will be taking place, the specific dates, it says, for example, third week in January, kind of anticipating and waiting for the outcome of this board meeting before we publicized a specific date and started sending out information about that. So there will be information sessions in both Spanish and in English for all parents who are interested. One to begin in Spanish and English for our Madison parents. So for our incoming Ks who are already at Madison. There will be information through a Talk 205 and information at the district-wide kindergarten registration for the community as a whole. It talks about when the lottery will be taking place. It addresses the curriculum development. I think one of the pieces that's important is that dual language doesn't have its own and separate curriculum. It will use our District 205 curriculum. Eureka Math is already available to us in Spanish and is already used in Spanish in our bilingual classrooms. So what the curriculum development is for math, for example, is the bridging lessons that Ariana talked about in her presentation in December. So those opportunities where you take the content delivered in Spanish and bridge that knowledge over to English, or vice versa if you're delivering it in English. The same would be true for literacy. One of the great benefits is one of the districts we have contacted and worked with also uses school-wide for their literacy instruction. So even last year for our bilingual classrooms, when we started using school-wide, we reached out to that district to get the titles in Spanish that they use to align the lessons for Spanish instruction. And so we were already able to purchase those last year for our bilingual classrooms at Fisher. So it's the bridging opportunity, not necessarily curriculum creation that will take place. The professional learning is mapped out beginning in February. It also includes, for the teachers who will be the dual language teachers, a summer institute of intensive dual language instruction. So there's quite a bit kind of with instruction and planning and professional learning, as well as communication that's built in.
And then also, I think there's a link. Is there a link to the North Carolina study that talks about the value that the English language speakers got?
Yes, there's a link that gives a really nice 3-page kind of executive summary that breaks down those results. So that's linked in that board doc.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Just one last piece. I think we saw in the meeting, in the standard base reporting meeting, how you continually took the feedback from the parents and then you use that to update. How will that be implemented for this dual language?
We would need to collect feedback the same way as we work with Mary Ann Lemke on how we are analyzing and evaluating the program, incorporating parent-teacher feedback will be important. Kindergarten feedback from the students is a little dicey. There are ways you can do it, but you know, certainly our parents and our teachers.
I think that Ariana addressed this a little bit in December. The schools that implement this, they have regular dual standing parent committees and parent nights where they have regular ongoing communication with the parents of students who are in that program, because a lot of times parents need assistance trying to figure out how do they help their students at home, other things like that. And so they do that regularly. And we obviously, you know, will do that.
Right. Currently, we have what's called BPAC, which is the Bilingual Parent Advisory Council. So Ariana's been talking with that group for quite a long time about bringing dual language in and why that model is more beneficial to students than a TBE program. So BPAC won't go away because that parent group spans all three levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. But what will be formed is a dual language parent advisory council, where it will be comprised of parents in the dual language program.
Well, let's see. And I know we've got plans on how to make sure we have the parents who are participating. I'm wondering, is there a way, how can we, the rest of the Conrad Fisher community who might not have a parent, a student in this dual language, but is still impacted, and obviously I think beneficially impacted by this, how will they be able to provide feedback and information?
So Jane, if you would like to comment, certainly feel free. You know, I think the most effective communication with parents is typically classroom teacher to parent. And so a lot of the work that they do internally in their building, you know, will support the teacher's ability to do that. I also think, generally speaking, as the upper grade levels matriculate through the system, those students and those families aren't really going to notice any differences in their child's experience. But I think, Jane, you know, certainly you work with your parents all the time, so feel free to chime in.
Yeah, there are any number of initiatives that have occurred at Fisher over time where we have put out a brief survey just to gather information about strengths and concerns, and then working through that kind of stuff to improve the program that we're working on. You know, what are the issues and trying to deal with it. And when we do it, we put it out in English and Spanish. We promote it. I think you'll also see stuff come through the potential of 5 essentials. That's one of the things that, you know, parents have as a tool to give feedback. And, you know, I'm always willing to listen, and parents are always willing to talk to me. I think that's part of it too, is just the informal assessment of what are we hearing, what's happening in the community and in the schools. So I think that'll be a part of it as well, and try to capture that.
Do you feel like your teachers are excited at this opportunity? I know it's been talked about. I mean, there was a meeting about it when my daughter was in 1st grade and she's a junior. So I don't feel like we're rushing into anything. But, you know, I'm sure there's, you know, with anything new, there's nervousness, but then is there excitement? And
I think there is excitement. You know, we were just talking about it today. We have a plan to meet with the staff as a whole just for kind of Q&A tomorrow morning, should this be approved. A parent meeting in front of PTA on Tuesday night. Again, for any interested parents that you know, want to hear more, and just kind of continuing along that spectrum for the course of the year. Just more information and everybody feeling a part of the development of this. So we have teachers talking already about, you know, curriculum design and, you know, how we're going to go about some of those things. And yes, where it is pretty much the same, there are some pieces. For example, Eureka Math does not have 2 of the assessments that are given to all other students. They don't have the pre-assessment and midterm assessment in Spanish. So our teachers have made them, you know, and then you come up with how do we share those and just, you know, problem solving at that very base level. But, you know, Fisher teachers are more than willing to go the extra mile, and they do a beautiful job at that.
Very agreed, and you also go the extra mile, so thank you. Because there's
tried.
no one, I mean, just knowing that you'll be there to implement it and help it get started is fantastic.
Okay.
So Jane, stay up here, I think. That's okay. So I'm getting I'm getting a sense that just like anything new, you know, we're trying to anticipate everything. We're trying to do the right thing. But of course, there's a little bit of uncertainty because we're not well on our way, you know, years down the way. It sounds as though that it is best for our students. We see the studies, we hear it from everyone. We've been talking about it even at the school, Conrad Fisher, for a number of years now. So why would we not do something that's beneficial for our students to help them grow so that they can be more confident in themselves? And we work through, you know, what comes up, right? Like we do every other day with anything else. But the piece that I'm hearing is this: we're finally getting to a point where we've always talked about our facilities for how long, you know, that potentially might be our hindrance, right? We typically in school, in the school environment, no matter where you are, every 5 to 7 years, you run a referendum for facility upgrades. That all came to a screeching halt in 2008 when the economy, you know, tanked. And so I guess the point that I'm hearing is, you know, I know that we've done Focus 205 for a long time. We've talked about facilities, but you don't really understand it, the whole community, until we have things like this, where we could be offering things to our students, bettering our education system for our tax dollars and community, and our facilities are our issue. I mean, 2006 was the last referendum we've done. Not that I want to do any of this stuff personally, but at some point, we're 12 years down since the last one. You know, we have to start figuring this thing out. It seems as though those two things are coming together with this program. It's kind of what I'm hearing a little bit of. And so we're, you know, it's not an easy road based on facilities at not just Conrad Fisher, but all of our facilities. We even heard from Frank. You know, York was our big ticket item in 2006, and already, you know, we're getting to a point where it's not a new building anymore, and it's getting more expensive. We got Lincoln that's 100 years old. Unfortunately, we can't do a TIF in our buildings, our schools, and say that they're blighted and, you know, get relief, but this is what we're...
You might actually see another shift. I mean, first of all, this is what good educators do. They anticipate misconceptions and maybe some challenges down the road and try to kind of be proactive in at least identifying those things. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. One of the things that a shift that you might see, and I don't know, but we have 4.5 ELL students. Well, if ELL needs are being addressed for a large part of the population, and keep in mind, we do have Malayalam and Urdu and other language groups, but those are minor compared to the Spanish population. You may see a reduction in those service providers. That might change, you know, something else. I mean, I think one step forward is going to impact the system as a whole. And so we have to kind of anticipate, we're not, just like standards-based reporting, you can't fit a grade quite into this, and it's hard to see, well, why didn't my kid get a 4? They're always getting A's, right? Same kind of thing when it comes to dual language. It's a different type of model, and we're going to have to think differently as we take next steps. Does that make sense?
And so what you're saying is that not just think differently in this particular program, but as a whole, everything. And that's the way that then you resolve some of the issues.
At that point, exactly. It's a whole different model. And now we're teaching for bilingualism. So how many people actually took foreign language in school, right? But how many of us are actually bilingual? So, you know, there it is right there. And if you're looking at future focused and you're looking at a global society, you want bilingualism, you know, and that cultural competence that comes with it. And I think if anybody's ever talked to some of our teachers at Fisher, whether they're native speakers or they've come to the field independently and they're Anglo and whatever, they have a different level of cultural competence and understanding about people and that impact on learning and life and values and beliefs and norms.
I did want to add too, on January 27th, when we have the board workshop where we start to talk about some initial ideas on a master facilities plan, after the board has an opportunity to weigh in and process, we do have some plans, and we'll talk about this on the 27th, where we then would like to have the board's blessing to go and get input and feedback from the community to try to better understand what they're interested in, what they want, what they're willing to support. And if that process goes forward and we continue to get input and feedback, then, you know, people across the community will be weighing in on a lot of the exact issues that you just brought up about all the various different facilities across the district. So
I just wanted to say thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
I had a, Jane, maybe you want to stay there, sorry. Yeah, just stay. I know. Well, this is a big change, but I'm going to echo what Kara said. 5 years ago, there was a superintendent's advisory committee, and dual language was talked about then. I read the report again. So this has been talked about for many, many, many years. And we also know that what we're doing right now for our English learners is not working. Our achievement gaps are widening. So each year we see the gap getting larger and larger in October when we have the student achievement reports. So what we're doing right now is not working for those students, for those English learners.
Right, and when we talk about achievement gap, doesn't that appear to be almost a deficit model that somewhere along the line it's the kids that are at fault rather than the system is not meeting their needs? And so what have we done at Fisher over the last, let's just say 5 years? Let's start with the 2013 thing. What have we done as we look at the same data? We try harder every single year. Well, we're getting to the point where there's not harder. There's just not harder. And we're not making those gains that everybody's anticipating and hoping for. There are glimmers, yes, but you know, the rigor has gone up, the expectations have increased, nothing is decreasing. So that's part of it as well.
And there's also a lot of evidence from the board, the information on board docs of how it helps the native English speakers too. So it's both groups growing more.
Correct. It's a different way of learning, but it's, you know, little children are eager to learn. And you start them off in kindergarten, and little ones learn language at an incredibly fast pace. And they're not going to really even know quite what's happening because this is how we do school. And they start from kind of base, and here we go. And you won't find kids objecting to it. Parents want enhancements in this district. They want enrichment opportunities. They want their kids to have the full benefit of opportunities, right? This is an opportunity. And it's not something to be fearful of exactly, because we have to think differently. And if anybody knows, and if you go back and read, and I'm sure my name is in there, In 2013, I was not on board because we were not fully prepared. We hadn't grappled with some pretty difficult concepts, and we weren't ready to change our thinking. Now we're ready to change our thinking. We're looking at a different world. We have different leadership. Things are more in place to make it happen. There was actually less work done in 2013 than there was done for this current initiative, just so people know, because I've been part of all of it.
Thanks a lot, Jane, and everybody who's worked on this. One of the things that I did, just so people know, is when I wanted to hear from the administration that we're going to keep an eye on this. We're going to allocate time and resources to coming back, and I want to make sure it gets on our calendar as a board to come and talk about it. When we had Mr. McNulty here back in September of 2016, and he talked about districts like ours who are relatively successful, and they should do 90% better at everything, and then 10% transformational. And I think this is transformational. It's not unique. We're not early adopters. We're actually late adopters. I know some of the districts have dual language Mandarin, which is Jim likes. He's not here, so I thought I'd bring it up.
There's kids graduating high school that started dual language,
yes,
12 years ago.
So we're not breaking anything here. We have this statement, all is all. And it is a political statement, and it's a political statement about allocation of resources, that we're going to give more in some places, and that's our commitment to every kid. This is a gem of a program, in my opinion, or it's contemplated. We're going to have these evaluation sessions to make sure it's heading in that direction. But this is a benefit. This is us putting something really good at Fisher School. We had discussions about how there was a disparity and a misallocation that didn't provide an equal resources through the donations that happen, disparate donations. But this is an attempt where something going to Fisher that is, it's better. It's good, it's transformational, it's great. The trick is, just like when we've had other discussions, is not to impose a disparate cost on another group of students as you're trying to serve one group of students. So it's an allocation issue, and that's what we need to come back and do, and make sure that none of those costs are disparate on those people who are not in it. And I think that's one of the conversations that I want to make sure we touch on when we come back to evaluate this. So I support this. Again, it's a great program. The question has never been if, it's a question of how. And I really support this. And let's keep an eye on it, and let's not be afraid of a big change that's going to be transformational. So that's my little speech. Thank you.
And you asked my question, but I just want to get more definitive. So we've got a calendar on here with conversations with the public with signups. I mean, I can't wait to see the reception of this. When can we get an update on kind of the signups? How the parent, I mean, I think we should check back sooner rather than later on that when you get through. When's a good time to schedule that?
I'm looking at, let's see, the lottery. So potentially in early April, we'll have gone through the communication process and the lottery process where parents are choosing to commit, and then if their name's drawn in the lottery, then meeting with them to make sure they have a full understanding of what they're committing to and signing up and all of that.
Okay. Yeah, so if we could do that in April, but in the interim, I'd love to know whether we're going to have a lottery. So
oh, sure.
It's just, I mean, just that data point would be helpful to see how it's received. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see, and Chris reminded me of this. So the whole idea of the lottery, if by chance people don't sign up, then we don't have a program? How does that work? I mean, I know that's but if by chance no one signs up, then what?
So based on our number of EL students, we anticipate 3 sections. If we don't have 3 sections worth of native English speakers, then we have to come back and regroup and look at one-way immersion, potentially. What we won't do is go back to a TBE model. I can't support going back to a model that repeatedly is telling us it's not working.
And Margaret, just to follow up on that, I think last time you said you wouldn't run it with less than 2 sections. I mean, there was a number that you gave me.
I think what we talked about was that we did not want either with native English speakers or with dual language classrooms. You don't want a single strand.
A single strand, right.
Right.
Okay, so that was your answer. I was just
yes.
closing the loop on that.
Yeah.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion passes. Moving to approval of lacrosse fees. We had a presentation last month, and I need a motion for this agenda item.
I approve that the Board of Education approve the participation fees to be set at $175 for boys and girls lacrosse beginning with the spring of 2018 season.
I second.
Okay, moved by Karen, second by Margaret. Any discussion? I know we had the discussion last month. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion passes. Of the resolution of the Board of Education transferring money from the Education and Operations and Maintenance Funds to the Debt Service Fund.
This is something we do every year in accordance with the Illinois Program Accounting Manual. The payments for debt service need to be paid out of the debt service fund, so we transfer out of the education fund for technology leases and out of the operations and maintenance fund for debt certificates.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution to transfer money from education and operations and maintenance funds to the debt service fund for the purpose of payment of technology leases and debt certificates for fiscal year 18.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by John, seconded by Chris. Any discussion? It's an annual event. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. Superintendent's communication.
Yeah, I would just like to thank our presenters tonight. And I did want to indicate that I was recently at Field observing a late arrival, and I was recently at Hawthorne observing a first grade data review meeting. And at Hawthorne, now one of our KPIs is that all students are reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. The Fontes and Pinnell testing, which is associated with standards-based and some of the PLC concepts that they were talking about in their presentation, and we will explain that at a future board meeting in one of our presentations so people can understand that a little bit better. They were down in December to only 5 first grade students that were still not reading at grade level. And they are 100% confident that every student will be reading at grade level by the end of first grade. And the depth of the conversations, the discussions that they were having about owning all students' learning was very impressive. And you would not have seen some of that maybe as little as a year or two ago. And the same thing with Field. We talk about the rigor and relevance framework, and we were talking about learning targets and what is rigor. And they did an exercise where they were evaluating the rigor of the discussion based on the actual standard that was being taught in a video. And they had a blank rigor and relevance framework, and they filled in, the teachers collectively filled in where they thought the instruction was occurring in each framework and made notes in each framework. Then they turned over on another blank framework, and they worked together as teams, and they started to decide how they could take each one of those different things that they were seeing and move them into quadrant D and increase the rigor of the learning and the instruction and the assessment. And so I just wanted to say that because the things that they're talking about there, I've seen them in the last 2 weeks of school when we were in session, and it was very impressive. So I just wanted to thank them and kind of provide some testimony that these things are actually occurring. And that's it.
Any board communications tonight? Okay, we have 3 upcoming meetings. Next Board of Education meeting is January 23rd at 7:30. And then Saturday, January 27th, is a special Board of Education meeting. We'll be discussing a master facility plan at 9 a.m. here at the District Center. And then the following board meeting is Tuesday, February 13th, 7:30. And we've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned.